Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar on the Competence Framework, second edition, an introduction to the benefits of the framework. My name is Gill Hancock. I'm the Head of Professional Standards and Knowledge at APM and will be taking you through the webinar this afternoon. The webinar itself is being recorded and will be available on the APM YouTube channel this afternoon or tomorrow morning, and the membership development managers will also be circulating the links, so you'll have access to the webinar via that route as well. Okay. So what are we covering off in terms of the competence framework and the benefits and how that's going to work? Well, some of the things we're going to be looking at would be in relation to the changes that have been made, how those changes have been put into place, and also the reasons as to why we had to change the competence framework. Now, originally the competence framework and the current edition of the competence framework that's been around since 2008 only covered project management. And in relation to that, we wanted to cover the programme and portfolio management as well, so it also had a link through to the body of knowledge 6th edition that looks at programme and portfolio as well as project management. We also needed to update it so we were fully aware of all the changes that happened in the profession since 2008 when the competence framework was developed, and make sure it's an up-to-date and professional framework for people to use. So those are some of the key reasons why we made the changes. Now, we didn't want to just do that purely on the sort of feedback we had on the old framework that was in existence, but we wanted to do some consultation in relation to that and how we move forward with that. Okay. So in terms of just confirming why we need to make the change, we had the current framework not been reviewed since 2008. The first edition is only relevant to project managers and not inclusive of programme and portfolio management. We needed a resource that was fit for purpose for 21st century project professionals, and we also wanted to create a platform where we could build our new proposition in line with our 2020 strategy vision. So again, it's making sure we have that really solid platform that we could then move forward and look at the 2020 strategy vision of living in a world in which all projects succeed. Okay. And we also wanted to respond to customer feedback. And as I was saying, we didn't just want to have the feedback based on the usage of the old competence framework, but we wanted to actually do some extensive research and consultation on how the framework was developed. So we carried out a number of focus groups, telephone interviews and face-to-face meetings and online surveys. We also employed an independent research company to do this. So it wasn't done internally by APM, but it was done by an independent research company. It was very keen for us for the competence framework to be developed by the profession for the profession. So a lot of those focus groups and face-to-face meetings that we had were looking at how we could really focus the content of the competence framework and how we could really make sure it represented the needs of the profession. And that research confirmed the need to extend beyond project managers to include programme and portfolio and PMO roles as well. The new framework needed to recognise different jobs and job roles and project complexity, and also programme and portfolio complexity as well. And that's one of the key important things really, is we didn't know when we first started whether or not it was going to be one competence framework or a number of different competence frameworks to cover project, programme and portfolio management, and also the PMO roles. But what actually came out of those focus groups and those discussions and the face-to-face meetings, so actually a lot of the competencies, particularly in programme and portfolio management, are similar, but it's the context and the complexity in which we're working that's different. So that was one of the key things that we took forward in terms of the research that we had. We've also had messaging back that integrating a new framework, and those that already use the current framework will take time, possibly as long as 24 months in some organisations. And we're keen to work with organisations where they've embedded part of our old competence framework or in its entirety, who actually work alongside with you. For those of you who are looking to embed the new competence framework for the first time, obviously that process will then be a lot shorter. You also told us we needed to make a number of changes to make the competence framework more effective, and we'll go through some of those changes as we go through the webinar to show you what those changes are and the benefits that those changes bring. So what has actually changed? We have updated the competence framework content. We have new role profiles, so it's not just the competencies but how those competencies can be applied in different roles. We have a new rating scale. One of the big pieces of feedback that we had is that the 0 to 10 rating scale was not particularly user-friendly, and generally people used a subset of that 0 to 10 rating scale when they're using the old competence framework. So we now have a new rating scale which is 1 to 5. And we also have new complexity guidance that sits alongside the competence framework. So the new competence framework itself is streamlined and easier to use. The number of competencies is reduced from 47 to 27, and that's to cover project, programme, portfolio and PMO competencies. As I was saying earlier, a number of the competencies in those discipline areas are similar, but it's the context and the complexity in which you're working that differs. We've managed to reduce the number of competencies in the framework by taking on board feedback from people with relation to the duplication in some of the competencies that existed in the old competence framework, but also we've taken the content up a level. So rather than going down into the detail of specific tools and techniques like earned value, for example, what you have in the new competence framework is competencies and performance indicators around monitoring and controlling your project or programme or portfolio, or change initiative, which is the generic term that's used, using the appropriate tools and techniques. So it could be that earned value is that tool and technique, but we don't go down into the detail of the competence in the specific tools and techniques within that. Okay. There are 14 role profiles matched to the new framework, and I'll come on to those in more detail later on. Can now be used by project, programme, portfolio managers and PMO professionals in terms of the competence framework, so we have broadened the coverage that's there. It's also an editable framework which can easily be integrated into existing frameworks or used as an out-of-the-box solution. The way we're making the competence framework available is there is a version of the competence framework on the website which is available for individual use, and that's the base competence framework. So that gives you all of the 27 competencies and a scoring matrix against there, which can be used for individual purposes and is there as open content. To gain access to the role profiles and the complexity guidance and the additional information that sits behind that, that's actually available as licensed content. So if you're interested in gaining access to those parts of the product, then please do speak to your business development manager or follow the links. They'll be circulating through to you tomorrow. It is cross-referenced to the edition 1 of the competence framework and also the IPMA ICB, the International Competence Baseline. That is the ICB, the current version of the ICB. There is a new version of the IPMA ICB due out later on this year, and we will also be providing the mapping to that once that documentation is published. So what are the competencies? We have 27 competencies. Not all of them are relevant to each of the roles, but those 27 competencies form the base framework that we've then developed the role profiles from. There are some competencies in there that we would see specifically relating to either portfolio or programme management. One of those examples would be asset allocation, would be relating to portfolio management and not necessarily to project, programme or PMO, and capability development and financial management as well relate specifically, or more specifically to the programme management areas. So not all of them are relevant to each of the areas, but those are the 27 that form the basis of the framework. Benefits management is there as a separate competence, as competence 27, but when you look at the performance indicators of the competence framework, you'll also see that benefits management is a thread that runs through the performance indicators within the framework, and that's a very deliberate policy. And the thinking behind that is very much to say that if you're doing a project, programme or portfolio, then that you're doing it for a reason to achieve those benefits. So when you're looking at the other performance indicators, you need to be thinking of what those benefits would be and bearing those in mind. However, it was also felt that benefits management is such a crucial area that it needed a separate competence in its own right. So it's there as number 27 within the framework. It's just to point out that the competencies are in no particular order, so there is no hierarchy to them. So we're not saying that ethics, compliance and professionalism is more important than benefits management. It's just the structure in which the competencies have been put together. Okay. So what do the competencies actually look like? Here's an example of one of the competencies. It's the competence 4, which is leadership. You have a general description of what the competence is, followed by some introductory notes, which provide some more context about the competence itself. You'll see throughout the competence framework we use the term change initiatives, and that can refer to a project, programme or portfolio. And just having to repeat those 3 words throughout the competence framework. So where you see change initiatives, that's what we're referring to. Underneath there you then have the application and the knowledge performance indicators, and they are set out in the way that you can see there. They're very much outcome-based performance indicators, so you can clearly say whether or not you have achieved that performance indicator in relation to that competence. The thinking behind the competence framework is you actually assess yourself holistically against the application criteria and against the knowledge criteria. So rather than scoring yourself separately on each of the performance indicators, you look at the performance indicators as a whole under the application section or as a whole under the knowledge section, and then you give yourself a rating between 1 and 5, 1 being aware and 5 being an expert. And the rating scale again is available for you to see free of charge on the APM website. If you're scoring yourself against all 27 competencies, that means that you'll be scoring yourself a maximum of 54 times, which is very different to the old version of the competence framework, which is where the scoring was then based against each of the performance indicators, where you could be scoring yourself up to 750 times. So there is a difference that's there, but we truly believe that the way we've now formulated the competence framework and the benefits that it brings gives you a very good view of where you are in terms of your professional competence and some of the areas that you might want to improve on or focus your development on. Okay, so the new role profiles. We have a number of role profiles that are relevant to all project professionals. We have 14 of them which have been developed for project professionals. We have 4 at project management, 3 in programme, 3 in portfolio, and 4 relating to PMO roles. The role profiles for projects go from an entry-level project manager all the way through up to master. With programme and portfolio, we start at the intermediate level and go through to master. With PMO, the approach we've taken is slightly different, and they relate more to job titles, if you like. So we're looking at things like a PMO administrator, a PMO officer, an analyst, and a PMO manager. And it's looking at some of those areas that those PMO professionals would need to embrace and be competent in. They can be used by all individuals to understand how they compare against their current role and also potential future roles. So by having those role profiles there, it allows individuals and organisations to look at how they can develop their competence within their organisation, or from an individual point of view, how they can plan their career. So if they're currently working in project management and want to move over to programme management, you can look at the competencies that are needed and take things forward from there to see the areas of development and plan your career an awful lot better. The gaps identified can be used to create support training and development solutions, and also form an integral part of a PDP process or professional development process within an organisation, or also individually from a CPD perspective. So what are the key benefits of the change? It is a modern framework, can be used as it is or integrated into an organisation's existing framework. You've got clearly defined competencies with easily measured outcome-focused performance indicators. It is the trusted professional body view. So rather than just providing the base competence framework with the role profiles, APM are putting a view out there to say actually this is what competent professionals need to be able to demonstrate, they need to be able to deliver, and if you're saying you're a professional in a particular area, then this is the level we'd be expecting of you. So it is the trusted professional body view. It does provide an effective benchmarking tool for individuals and organisations to then take forward. It enables project professionals to identify their strengths and also their development needs. It also enables organisations to establish, embed and measure effective project management skills. And again, that's across the different disciplines, that's project, programme, portfolio and PMO. And it also facilitates the movement between those project professional disciplines as well. So it does allow you to identify those gaps and look at your professional development, but also from an organisational perspective allows you to identify the gaps that you may have within your professional skills and how you might want to address those. Just to re-emphasise in terms of the role profiles themselves, they are part of a licensed content package that APM have put together. The base competence framework content is available free of charge on the APM website for individual use. So in terms of other benefits, how can the new competence framework benefit you as an individual? Like I was saying earlier, you have the competence framework you can measure your knowledge and skills against, and you have a plan for future needs. With the outcome-based performance indicators, it's more than just looking at the areas that need to be developed, but you can actually go down to the performance indicator level and take some benefit and some development needs from those specific performance indicators. They are outcome-based, so you are looking at what you need to be able to do for the application side of things, and for the knowledge, it's what you need to know to be able to support that application. So there is a lot of detail within there, and it does allow you to measure yourself at a more granular level, should you wish to do that. Assessing capacity across the organisation. This, for me, from an organisational point of view, is really key. So with APM providing the benchmark, of where, as a professional body, we're saying the competence level should be for each of the individuals working within project, programme, portfolio and PMO. It allows the organisation to use that as a benchmark and actually assess their project professional knowledge and skills at all levels across the organisation. The competencies for a lower level project manager compared to somebody who's operating at a more senior project management level are very, very similar, but it is the context and the complexity with which you're working that does make the difference, and that's where the rating scale really helps out to differentiate people and where they sit and where they can develop into. So it's worth having a look at the rating scale and having a look at that in more detail to see how you can actually assess those knowledge and skills across the different levels in the organisation, and how as an organisation you can look to move and fill those gaps should you have them. It is that independent benchmark, it is an independent point of view. We fully appreciate that project, programme and portfolio management goes across different industry sectors, and not every industry sector will be exactly the same in terms of what they're looking for and the competencies that the people need to have. There is going to be some sector-specific competencies that aren't covered in the APM Competence Framework. The APM Competence Framework is there as a generic core for project, programme and portfolio management and PMO personnel as well, but it does provide that generic core that organisations can then develop and use and embed in the way that they want to embed it within their organisations that's most useful for them. But it does provide that standardisation and quality assurance to say you do have that independent professional body view to help inform those decisions and those discussions. It's one strand of a lifetime of professional support. APM's new competence framework is evidence of our bigger story. It's enabling greater profession and developing profession and its impact on organisational goals. It is very much part of the toolkit which APM can provide to support that professional development. By having the competence framework in the format that we now have it in, with the role profiles that support that, we can then look to develop further products and services based around that. So the competence framework then becomes that central spine of professional development within organisations. And then everything that is there within the organisation in terms of professional development and also from an individual perspective is based around that progression through those role profiles and through those competencies. So there's that standardisation of approach which organisations can find beneficial. It can be used by an organisation and departmental design in developing job descriptions, performance management strategies and also performance-related pay schemes. Particularly with the role profiles, the way the role profiles are set out gives an overview of what we believe a role at a particular level will include. So it's not just the competencies that are there and how those competencies will be implemented, but it's also looking at a general job description for a typical role in that arena and at that level. So it can be useful in terms of organisational job descriptions and also the performance management strategies that are there to provide you that independent view and take it forward and develop it in the way that suits you as an organisation and also the sector that you're working in. So in terms of marketing and communications, what are APM doing to ensure that people are aware of the new competence framework and the benefits that it can bring? There's a number of activities that are going on. The competence framework itself was launched on the 2nd of June and there's been various promotions since then, this webinar being one of the areas of communication that we're looking at. There's been a themed email programme based on audience type, so specific messaging to specific organisations, an integrated social media campaign. There are homepage banners to promote the new framework and also a series of themed fortnightly webinars aimed at different audiences so we can answer the questions that are pertinent and important to you as individuals rather than putting generic messaging around the competence framework that's there. So how does this support APM's future plans? As I was saying earlier, we're looking at creating that platform for future products and services, including an APM development pathway towards RPP. So it is very much that central product, which other products and services are then developed from, to create a career pathway and a career development pathway for all project professionals moving through their careers. It underpins the structure and syllabus for a new qualification that's currently in development, and it also underpins CPD and wider career development. That's from the individual point of view, the organisation point of view, and also from APM's point of view. So with the performance indicators as they're written and competencies as they're written, it allows for a lot of flexibility and a lot of planning in terms of their professional development journey and also the wider career development that people can find useful and move forward from there. Okay, so if you want to find out more, where do you go to? Have a read through the website for more details. Like I say, the base competence framework content is available for you to have a look at, and the rating scale and a scoring mechanism is there as well. So have a look at that, but I just do need to emphasise that's for individual use only. Have a look at the frequently asked questions section on our website. A number of questions that you might want to ask in relation to the competence framework will be there with the answers. But if you still have any questions or want to find out how you can access the new framework and the role profiles and the further content that sits alongside the framework, then please do contact your BDM, your business development manager. They'll be more than happy to help, and they, as I say, they will be circulating the links tomorrow, so you will have a direct contact with them following on from this webinar as well. Okay. That's a quick run through in terms of the changes and the benefits. I wanted to allow time for questions as well at the end of the webinar to make sure that we actually answer the questions that you are keen to ask and make sure you're fully aware of the benefits and how the competence framework can help you.
Okay, we've got first question from Andy. How will the new APM framework link to the IPMA ICB?
Okay, the IPMA ICB is the International Competence Baseline, which is the competence baseline produced by IPMA, the International Project Management Association, of which APM is one of the leading members and one of the largest members. The International Competence Baseline is mapped to the new competence framework, and that mapping is available as part of the licence materials, and we can sort of make that available to people via the licensing process. But there is a mapping and there is the coverage of how the ICB links to the new competence framework.
Question from Beverly. Many of our team are currently submitting their APM member applications for full membership. Are they okay to carry on as current under the current competencies, or do they now have to submit them under the 27?
Thanks for that question, Beverly. If people are preparing their full member applications based on the old version of the competence framework, that's absolutely fine. The criteria for member applications is to look at 5 years project management experience, to demonstrate that you've managed projects within that time, that you've held budgetary responsibility within there, you're aware of the methodologies and systems that you use within project management, and also that you can demonstrate 4 or 5 competencies in relation to each of those projects. If you want to use the competencies based on the old competence framework, that's absolutely fine, that's not a problem. The new competence framework is also there for people to access should they wish to refer to that.
Okay, a question here from Andy. Is the plan to use the competence framework to help reshape APM's training and certification programs?
Okay. Thanks for the question, Andy. In relation to APM qualifications, the introductory certificate, the APM Project Fundamentals qualification, and the APM Project Management qualification, which is the APMP, are based on the body of knowledge and will remain to be based on the body of knowledge as the source document for their development. So they will continue along exactly the same lines as they are at the moment. With regards to new qualification development, there is a new qualification being developed based on the new competence framework, and we will be looking to move RPP over to alignment with the new competence framework, and that's sort of in the planning stages as we speak in terms of when that will actually happen. In the meantime, the RPP standard will remain as the standard is, and there will be a linkage through to how that maps across to the new competence framework.
How does the new framework support bid management roles?
Okay. The role profiles that are within the new competence framework and support the competence framework are based around sort of project manager roles, program manager roles, portfolio manager roles, and also PMO roles. There are some competencies that relate to bid management and also contract management and procurement within the competence framework. As it stands at the moment, there's not a specific role profile for bid managers within there, but we are looking at possible future developments in relation to the competence framework, which will be future time where we can potentially add additional roles onto there. But in the current framework and the current content, there are some specific competencies that would be useful, but there's not a specific role profile for bid managers.
When are the aligned new qualifications available, and does this include qualification routes mapped for PMO professionals?
Okay. There is a new qualification under development at the moment, and that's looking at being released in the autumn of this year. In relation to PMO qualifications, we don't have any specific PMO qualifications under development at the moment. What we wanted to do was really to test the new PMO role profiles that we have within the new framework, and then we can have further conversations around any other future products should there be a market need for them.
Is the expectation that an RPP level professional is at the highest level of all competencies?
With regards to the RPP standard, the RPP standard is remaining as it is at the moment, and it will be aligned and linked across to the competence framework. But the standard as itself will remain as it is at the moment, and the guidance that supports it isn't changing. Okay. That's all the questions that we have had come through, so thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Like I say, the webinar will be available via the APM YouTube channel, and there will be links circulated as well. If you do have any other questions, then please do speak to your business development manager or be in contact with them.